Gold has a way of calming our nerves when the world seems to be going in the wrong direction. It's portable and practical, it doesn't tarnish or change, and anywhere on earth you may go, there's someone who will accept it on trade. That's why people have for thousands of years used it as a safe haven or simply as a way to diversify their assets. And back in ancient Rome, the Roman elites had the same idea about this metal. I'm talking about senators, important merchants, those who fought for Rome in its legions. They all kept portions of their fortunes in gold coins and objects, not just because of the reasons I just mentioned, but especially during the imperial period, because they knew gold was a great way to protect themselves financially when the emperors started resorting to some unorthodox methods of manipulating the currency. And the more I study Rome's relationship with currency manipulation and inflation, the more I think we're headed in a similar path. So, in today's video, we're going to look at how the Roman elites used gold to protect themselves from inflation, to protect themselves from the ups and downs in Rome's economy and political dramas, and I don't know, we might even learn a thing or two about the timeless nature of gold as real, tangible money. Let's get started. Gold in the shape of coins entered Rome's monetary life relatively late. During most of the Republican period, silver was the only precious metal in circulation, with gold coins being made only in very specific emergencies, as the supply of silver was not enough for war expenses. Gold was simply too scarce to support a large, regular issue. As an example, during the Second Punic War, as Hannibal ravaged the Italian peninsula, Rome issued a series of special gold coins, very likely using gold seized from its temples as a desperate way of raising as much cash as possible to make a stand against the Carthaginians. The situation changed as Rome became a Mediterranean power, expanding into regions rich in mines such as Iberia, Gaul, and Britain, and as its expanded territory granted them easier access to places like Egypt, North Africa, and the Middle East, where gold was more easily obtainable through trade. The result was a visible increase in available gold beginning in the 1st century BC. And that's the time period when we see the first truly large gold issues being made in Roman territory. First under people like Sulla and Julius Caesar, and a few decades later, the first emperor, Augustus, formalized Rome's gold coin, the aureus, as a part of the monetary standard and a regular gold denomination that was made at the mints. He set up a bimetallic system in which gold and silver circulated together at a legal rate of 25 silver denarii to 1 gold aureus, implying a gold to silver ratio of roughly 12 to 1. Despite being a rare coin only seen in major transactions within the elite or as an instrument of savings, the high purity of both gold and silver coins meant both coins could be found in circulation and transacted at their face value stipulated by law. This situation endured for a couple of centuries, until the very end of the 2nd century AD. Unfortunately, the situation started to destabilize around the end of the 2nd century and especially in the 3rd century. A series of structural problems started to disturb the equilibrium of the Roman economy. First, Rome had a constant deficit of gold through trade. The purchase of luxury goods from places like India, China, and the Arabian Peninsula generated a permanent outflow of gold, with Pliny the Elder complaining that India was the sink of the world's gold as far back as the 1st century AD. As Rome stopped its wars of expansion in the mid-2nd century, this also led to a steep reduction on the influx of gold into the empire from spoils of war. Adding to that, the slow exhaustion of the gold mines inside the empire's territories, and gold started becoming rarer and rarer due to this structural deficit of the metal. We see this reduction of the supply of available gold manifested in festivals such as the Liberalitas. In this event, emperors displayed their largesse and generosity by distributing money to the public. This was a very common way to boost his popularity. Coins of all metals were made specifically for these occasions. They even had special designs on the coins, marking these coins as gifts, and people from all social classes received something. From the 2nd century onwards, we start to see the aureus in these ceremonies being replaced by the quinarius aureus, a smaller coin worth half an aureus. Full-weight silver denarii, however, were still given. This might indicate an austerity move to conserve gold, which must have been in short supply. The thing is, what really caused major problems to the Roman economy was the constant debasement of its silver coinage. Silver coins formed the bulk of the monetary supply, so even though Rome operated under a bimetallic system, in practice it functioned like a silver standard, with gold playing the role of a concentrated store of value. Starting in the 2nd century AD, emperors started reducing the silver fineness of the denarius in order to keep the army and the state funded, despite not having enough silver to do it. The reduction was gradual and very hard to notice at first. From 100 to 200 AD, the denarius fell from about 90% under Trajan to roughly 75% under Marcus Aurelius and Commodus. The aureus, on the other hand, did not see its gold content reduced, retaining a high purity of 95% plus for most of the time it was issued. And there were plenty of reasons to justify that resilience of gold. First and foremost, one of the ways the elites, the ones that decided if the silver was going to be debased, one of the ways these elites had to preserve their wealth was with gold. Silver could be debased in order to stretch the state budget, but since gold was used to buy the support of powerful allies, conduct high-level transactions amongst the elites, and as savings for the powerful, it never saw its purity reduced. And the luxury products they purchased also had to be bought using high-purity gold. Foreign merchants rejected the bad gold coins, so they had to use high-quality gold in order to access these goods. The poor denarius, however, just kept losing more and more of its silver. After the disastrous reign of Commodus and the civil war that followed it, inflation and debasement of coinage really picked up pace. In just 17 years, between 193 and 210, the denarius dropped from about 75% fineness in the early reign of Septimius Severus to roughly 50%. Gold began to trade at a premium against the new denarius of lower quality, breaking the old 25-to-1 relation. Spending gold simply became irrational, so people either hoarded their gold or demanded more denarii for their gold coins. In 215, Emperor Caracalla tried to fix the situation by cutting the aureus weight from 7.3 grams to roughly 6.5 grams. This was done in an attempt to put gold back in circulation by making coins of lighter weight that were more in line with the new silver coins of lesser fine content. However, the adjustment seems to have been largely ignored and hoarding just continued. What Caracalla seemed to have ignored is that people were hoarding not just because there was an environment of economic uncertainty and blatant manipulation of the currency. People were afraid of the instability of Roman politics. Caracalla's father came to power through violent means. He himself killed his own brother and co-emperor, and it's not like people were paying attention to the silver to copper ratio on the coins in order to decide how much to hoard. They were doing it because political violence had become normalized. As the 3rd century progressed and the empire plunged into a period of crisis, silver coins kept being debased more and more as usurpers and short-lived emperors tried recruiting as many troops as they could to fight for the throne. This led to a complete and final disconnection between gold and silver. Gold was then transacted based on its metal weight. Its face value was ignored, and it lost any relation to the now untrustworthy low-grade silver coins of this now dysfunctional monetary system. Aureus struck under the emperors of the 3rd century crisis are extremely rare, mostly because these were only issued to pay for troops, as prizes for generals, or as stores of value for the powerful. Gold was not seen in circulation. The weight of the aureus during this time also started becoming increasingly erratic. During the worst moments of Rome's monetary collapse, under Gallienus and Claudius II, between around 265 and 270, aurei fluctuate wildly in weight, between 5 and down to 1.7 grams. This shows these coins were not part of the monetary system anymore, which by that time was entirely made out of coppery-looking coins with as little as 2% silver in them. This variation in weight indicates these coins were transacted purely by its bullion value. The fact it had the emperor's face in it was mostly as a way of these elites knowing that this gold came from the emperor they were currently maintaining in power. Gold coins had become the only reliable way of saving, and basically a parallel monetary system, mostly reserved for the military, the aristocracy, and maybe the important merchants who provided these people with the goods they needed. And today's video is brought to you by L5, the new ancient coin marketplace. L5 is a platform developed by coin collectors for coin collectors. It offers the lowest transaction fees on the market, from 5% down to 0. No listing fees or undisclosed reserve prices, and you can choose between buying and selling coins through its auctions or its fixed price lists. The most important idea behind L5 is generating an environment of trust between people. You can buy, you can sell, you can do both if you want to, all within a system of transparency and accountability between its users and the platform. Apart from a lifetime guarantee of authenticity in case any coin sold on L5 turns out to be a counterfeit, the platform works with a group of renowned experts on different fields of ancient numismatics and a body of expert moderators, with the objective of creating an environment of high trust where every single coin is reviewed by more than one person and curated by an input from the community. I think their concept of collaborative accountability, low fees, and transparency is a revolution to the ancient coin market, and I can't recommend the L5 enough. Give them a look. I personally think this is a wonderful concept that the ancient coin market was in need for. Visit l5.com. As we leave the 3rd century crisis, in which Rome miraculously survived it, we move into what we know as the late Roman Empire. That's the 4th and 5th centuries AD. We see this two-tiered monetary system was officialized and normalized. Emperors like Diocletian and Constantine both conducted monetary reforms, and both had one thing in common. The value of gold coins was disconnected from the other, lower valued coins. A gold solidus, the name of this new gold coin of the late empire, was worth its weight in gold. It didn't have a face value. A solidus was worth a solidus. There were also intermediate silver coins of high purity that were introduced for the sake of practicality, as one solidus was a lot of money. And these were valued as fractions of the solidus. One of the most common ones was the siliqua, also called keration in the Greek-speaking parts of the empire. 24 of these keratia made one solidus. By the way, that's where we get our word carats from, used today to describe the purity of gold. 24 keratia made up a solidus, and 24 carats today means something made out of pure gold. The unit we use is a direct inheritance from the Romans. And, we might have imagined that the nasty years of hyperinflation of the 3rd century would have taught the Romans their lesson about the dangers of debasement, monetary fraud, or coming up with money out of thin air. No, nothing further from the truth. After so many years of civil wars and external threats and just chaos, the empire that emerged from this chaotic period, the empire from the 4th and 5th centuries, was a very different institution compared to that of the 1st and 2nd centuries. The emperor was no longer the approachable princeps, the first citizen. He was now analogous to a king. He was your dominus. He was a powerful general and a man sanctioned by divine will. And you were not just a Roman citizen anymore. Actually, this didn't mean a lot. You were a subject of the empire, first and foremost. At around 300 AD, a complete monetary reform was enacted, and the new unit of account, the denarius communis, was introduced. It was used to tariff the lower value denominations. These were new coins issued in different weights and varying proportions of mostly copper and a little bit of silver. These were the majority of the money in circulation. Whenever a civil war broke out or a foreign invasion required increased military expenditure, or the state simply needed more money to fund itself but it did not have the available cash, the imperial office could simply launch an edict that re-tariffed these low-valued coins, raising their face value and issuing more of these now overvalued coins to fund whatever they needed. Of course, this was a highly inflationary move, but the thing is, times were different, and this new authoritarian nature of the imperial office had been normalized. The emperor simply could do such things. If that level of monetary manipulation was attempted back in the 1st or 2nd centuries, the senators or the plebs would have certainly complained, if not straight up risen in armed revolt. But in the late empire, the emperor was your dominus et deus, your lord and god. He had the god-given sanction right to do so, so he just did it. The late empire's inflationary numbers really put anything made in the 3rd century to shame. For you to have an idea, in 300 AD, a numus, a 10-gram coin with 5% silver in it, so a fine content of 0.5 grams of silver per coin, was worth 25 denarii communis. That means each of these units of account was the equivalent of 0.02 grams of silver. By 330 AD, under Constantine the Great, his numus coin, now called a centenionalis, or coin worth 100, that is 100 denarii communis, it had fallen to a weight of just 3.4 grams in a silver purity of 2.5%. That's a staggering reduction of weight and silver purity in relation to its face value. Under Constantine, each denarius communis was worth 0.00085 grams of silver. If we assume this level of devaluation of the coins transferred fully into price inflation, we get a cumulative inflation of 2,250% over the course of 30 years, or around 11% of yearly inflation rates. Imagine living under 11% inflation for most of your life. Pretty horrible, no? That's why in the late empire, so many low-ranking soldiers, or anyone not wealthy enough to have their savings in gold, they would prefer to be paid in kind, in the everyday products they needed, and a significant part of the economy devolved to barter. So how did Constantine not lose his head after scamming the lower strata of his people that much? Well, his troops, his court, the upper echelons of Roman society, everyone who had physical access to him, they handled mostly gold solidi and silver silique, and these never lost its value. The solidus established by Constantine was so stable in its weight and gold purity that it kept being issued in the same weight, 4.5 grams, and the same 95 to 97% purity for centuries. The last high purity solidus was made around 1040 AD, more than 700 years after it was introduced. It was one of history's most stable coins. So when looking at all of this evidence, from across the Republican period and its emergency issues, to the early imperial standard and the aureus, to its resilience as money during endless crisis periods, through the age of the solidus, and its continuation in the Eastern Roman Empire throughout the Middle Ages, we're talking about over 1,200 years of the use of gold as a store of value. I don't know about you, but if something has kept its reputation as being synonymous with money and savings for over a millennia, I would say that makes the point that gold is a pretty amazing form of money. Maybe not the only form of money, but certainly a pretty good one. And mind you, we've only looked at the case of the Romans in this video. Gold is mentioned all over the world, throughout history, whenever a monetary system meets hard times. Now, I know gold has just crossed $4,000 per ounce, and I don't know if we will return to a gold standard one day, but at least the Romans left us a nice lesson. Any durable monetary system anchors its value in real assets, not numbers on a ledge, bits on a computer screen, or even worse, some abstract concept that can be manipulated by some politician. So, what do you think? Do you think the Roman elites were right in using gold as a store of value? Would you use maybe silver instead? I would love to read what you think in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to leave a like, share, and subscribe if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon. Let me give a special thank you to all of my amazing channel members and Patreons for their generous support. This channel would not be the same without your help. And if you would like to be part of this list, have early access to my videos when they are uploaded to YouTube, and a series of other perks, make sure to check out my Patreon page and my members tab on YouTube. Thank you very much.